basic background for Full Table, Franny's been to one before, is that to bring people together to share like one person's passion or give them the ability to get feedback, just kind of have a more intimate discussion. And I kind of frame it in the in-between of a dinner party. You meet a ton of people, small talk, fun, but then like you see somebody walking down the street and you just nod at them because you aren't sure if they actually know who you are, right? Or a lecture, you go, you learn a ton, but there's no conversation to follow. So you're like, wow, I wish I could have like talked with that guy more or learned more, whatever. So the Full Table model basically gives one person or a couple or whatever the ability to get back on a song or pitch a business idea. We've had people tell stories. Hannah, our friend Hannah, shared her herbs, like in some tinctures, pretty cool. But anyways, Megan is our dear friend from Oregon, and the stage is hers today. So with that, Megan Ganim. Oh yeah, a little intro first. That's right. Starting off with Franny. Where are you? What do you do? Let's hear it.
My name's Franny. I live in Victor, Idaho, which is the other side of the Tetons. And my partner Blaine and I founded a small sourdough bread and now also sourdough wood-fired pizza business. And we just went through a Kickstarter process with much support from Will and funded and are now converting a horse trailer into a mobile pizza oven. So that's kind of what's happening in my life right now.
Nice. Evan and Brittany?
Hey, I'm Evan, that's Brittany.
Hi.
Good to see you guys and meet new faces. We currently live in Jackson. We're actually moving to Victor in like a month or so.
Cool. Congrats.
So we'll be on the cool side soon. We both started a company called Crag to Vine. We started about 2 years ago, but then I got injured and just things kind of took a little longer to get started than we expected. So really it was about a year ago. We do rock climbing and wine tasting tours down in Sedona, Arizona, both together or independently. So you can do both, or you can just wine taste or just learn how to climb. We're trying to get that started here in Jackson Hole area, but permitting is a much bigger difficulty around here than it is in a lot of other places, for obvious reasons. You know, there's tons of people that want to be doing things like that around here. We're working on getting a permit here and see if we can get it started up in this area. But obviously, with the closures and everything like that, our spring season has pretty much been shot. So April and May and kind of spilling into June would have been our high season down there. Aww. And that's not happening this year. So we're gonna take this time to move into a new house and do some renovations and use our time wisely. And hopefully, in the fall, if things are somewhat back to normal and tourism is an industry again, then maybe we'll continue. That's kind of where we're at right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Beautiful. And then I guess for those of you that don't know MJ and I, or haven't caught up with us in a while, MJ is still teaching yoga at Inversion. They're transferring or moving locations as we speak. And then I'm working for Giver, still wrapping up our crowdfunding efforts as well, like Franny. But yeah, all is good over here in East Jackson.
Nice.
And then Megan, you're the last one. Let's hear what you got.
Where to start? I've pretty much worked in marketing most of my career. I just started an events company called Made Rowdy. That's the one you guys might have seen in the email that Will sent. Obviously very paused out right now in terms of events. I was kind of the first to go events, but I actually have one client that's not an events client that I've been pretty busy with, but
I've done some virtual stuff.
Yeah, I've been trying to
salvage a few of the events that were already planned.
Yeah, we had this one Olympian panel for a client of mine, a nonprofit that was trying to host an Olympian panel. We had 700 people registered, and then like as COVID broke out, we had to cancel it and essentially just do it online instead. And they're not super set up with social media, so Facebook Live wasn't really an option. So we got a video crew in and basically used it as a content opportunity to get, because the Olympians were willing to come all together at that point and still video and do the whole deal. But
That's awesome.
like super pivoting, like in times like this, it's nuts. I'm either on pause or people are trying to figure out like, how do we do an event virtually? How long is this going to last? Like, etc. But I feel like I'm kind of tired of talking about COVID-19, but it's such a reality though. Yeah. But yeah, so I grew up in Oregon and moved to Truckee after bouncing around from Colorado to Laguna Beach to back up to Oregon, and then moved out to Truckee and hoping this will be kind of a long-term. We're actually buying a property here and hoping to build this summer. So that's our thing right now. But yeah, and this is Hayden. We're supposed to get married this summer. We'll see if that happens.
Oh, we're still getting married.
We're still getting married. Either way, those things are happening. Yeah. It's just a matter of when and where and what the hell that looks like. But yeah. So
Megan, can you give us some background on like the marketing and how you got into that?
Yeah, so I went to University of Oregon with Will and MJ. You two were probably one of my first two friends at school.
Megan, I was thinking about this the other day. The first time my parents ever came to Oregon, you were my friend that we went to Pepe and Johnny's. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, your sister was there too.
Yeah. Crazy.
I know. That feels like a lifetime ago. So I went to school at Oregon. I went to the journalism school. I ended up getting a public relations degree. And then I always wanted to live in a small town. And so I was trying to figure out, like, probably similar to you guys, like, how do you combine like outdoor industry, what you like, what you love with your job? And so I moved to Durango, Colorado, and worked for a PR firm. I was their first employee. They were a startup PR firm called Bold Brew. And I was kind of their guinea pig. It was horrible. No, there's goods and bads to it. It was a super learning experience, but I essentially was able to have an awesome job in a small town that I loved, and figured out that I didn't really like PR. I don't like the fake, in my opinion, aspect of what PR can be. And I struggled with like, okay, my degree is public relations. How do I break out of that? Maybe it doesn't even matter. And PR in the outdoor industry, it's just such a, to me, it was very like, bra, just because you're outside magazine means you're super cool. And I just had a hard time like accepting that. And so I moved away from that, and I was like, I'm going to be a realtor. I'm going to be an interior designer and a realtor. And so I was assistant for a guy for like 6 months who was a real estate agent in Durango. And then I got a job, completely pivoted, got a job in sales for ski racing media, who then I worked for like 5 years, maybe 4 years. And during that time, it was such a small company, online niche magazine, that I essentially ran their marketing program until they hired a marketing person. But came out of that. And I guess during all of that, I was doing a million other side jobs. And I'd be curious, I'm sure all of you guys do the same thing, where it was just like the side job hustle. Like I probably had, like, I think in Durango, I had 4 or 5 jobs, and they were, just project stuff. Like I was working for ski racing, and then I had, I was contracting, doing some PR work for an agency. And then I was doing like, I actually was helping throw events during all of this on contract for like a couple different agencies. And even so, doing the same thing with ski racing without the official title. And there's something super genuine that I like about events, that it kept calling to me, where I'm like, okay, this is real. Like people come to essentially what I do. I guess I haven't really said. Made Rowdy is a business that I technically focuses in the outdoor industry just because that's where my connections are, but not really limited to that necessarily. But I connect like brand with their consumer or customer through an experience, which is an event. So whether it's like a launch party for, Giver gloves, or, a speaker panel series for a snowboard company or a film festival, kind of, it varies, but essentially bringing people together. I get excited about that because it's fun. Like you literally, and what's even cooler too, as a small business, you have a client, you bring them to this finale of an event, you take a shot, and then you're done. And you like move on, like you go to the next project, which is like really satisfying. And it's not like, I ended up working for an agency that I loved everyone I worked with. I just had a hard time working 9 to 5 we had 2 main clients, and I was like, is this what it's like? Like grass is always greener, right? Like I worked 5 jobs, and I'm like, I'm so stoked to work this one job. Like you have 9 to 5, and that must be so easy. You just focus on like the marketing for that one company. And then I did that, and then I was like, uh-oh. Like, I'm thinking about all these other things. Like I need 3 more jobs now. How do I do that? So then I'm like, why don't I start my own company? Like I've always wanted to start my own company. And so I started it only in November. And so I've been like figuring out like pricing and logos and how do you even begin. And I got 4 clients right off the bat. So I was super busy, like been projected to like continue on and I probably would have at least 3 events a month this summer, but anyway, it's not going to happen now. But yeah, it's just like, how do you go from there? But yeah, it's been good. It's been a learning experience for sure for me. And I wish that, with all of this, COVID stuff, as a small business, last year I had a W-2, 1099. Like I've had a 1099 for like 5 years. Like payment protection program is like so confusing for me. Probably you guys too. So yeah, that's Made Rowdy. That's my events company, and I've been super pumped, and I'm kind of definitely stalled out right now, and I'm trying to figure out how do you pivot. And I'll have to ask you guys what you think about the concept for bringing, like growing and having maybe a marketing person that's like my side person. Because oftentimes with events, I've learned is that people want you to do all the marketing for them. And I don't necessarily like to do all the marketing for them. I want them to do it, and I'll plan the whole event. But maybe you figure out a way to hire somebody else who runs their social media, and they contract out for like the social side and the marketing side. And then I can take care of the event logistics side. And I was starting to try to figure that out.
You mean marketing? So I think Brittany and Evan and Franny'd have better knowledge about this already, but can you give us, or at least MJ and I, a background on like a client comes to you and says, hey, I'm doing a launch party for Giver gloves on this day. Like what are the steps you go through to get to that final day? Because to me, like I wouldn't even know where to start. Do they provide you with a lot of the information, like this is our dream, this is what we're looking for, or is it much more of a like, let's see what you can make happen? How does that work?
I think because I'm newer, it's a lot of let's see what you can make happen. Testing me out and like, well, where's this going to go? I think as I establish myself more, I'm hoping to have more systems in place. But I think to me, it's starting with your end goal in mind. So I'm asking clients like, what's your goal? How many people do you want to have here? Is the goal to show the product, or is the goal press? Like, is the goal email subscribers? Like it can vary. So it really depends. And then from there, gearing everything around what their end goal is. If they're like, hey, we're happy with 50 people here, let's try to get 150 people, of course. But, that's where you start to plan the venue and the vendors and the details around it. So like starting with the end in mind, I think is probably the easy for that. What do you guys think?
Yeah, what's your experience like with that?
I'm just curious, like, do you give a quote in the beginning, like for pricing, and then does that kind of change based on what the client wants, or is it kind of like let's see what this ends up being, at your service is just like a set price? Sorry. Rice cooker.
I definitely.
Megan, I think you're muted or something here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there you
I was just calling out.
I can weigh in because I've been involved in all the conversations she has with her new clients in terms of the background, and I think it really varies on who's paying. So like some people are comfortable with saying this is a flat fee, or they demand a flat fee, right? They're like, hey, like, I need to know what the costs are. And some people are like, well, we don't really know that we want this to be. And so let's start out here, and then we're flexible to change the pay as we go.
Yeah.
So like your North Star account's been very different because they just are starting that whole deal that you're doing. So they're like, no one knew what they wanted to be. So you didn't have a total end goal. It was like, let's develop this.
Yeah. Totally.
Versus someone that just like, I have this one event and I want to be huge, and here's what I have budget wise.
That's like the dream, right?
So yeah,
They do something cool.
Yeah. Sounds nice.
Yeah.
A lot of hand holding, and like I think a structure of payment where you bid and say, hey, this is going to cost $2,500 with my fee plus, or whatever, and then from there I have in the contract, like, if this goes over my estimated time, like I will bill hourly or something like that. So you kind of save your ass a little bit, because that's where starting up, I'm completely willing to like do things for half off without them even knowing it. And I need to learn how to kind of let them know that they're getting a deal,
right,
and hold their hand through that a little bit. And so like I'm learning how to figure that out, but because that's not my strength. I'd rather have somebody else.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
Our trailer, Megan, we have been receiving various like bids and quotes from like construction and builders, and something that I thought was cool was when one person offered a quote, and then he said if he goes over that, he will charge his hourly half off.
Okay.
So to show like us as the client, like I will do everything that I can, and I'm motivated and I'm incentivized to stick within like my estimate. But if for some reason I don't, like I'll meet you in the middle. And that like made us feel like really seen and good, and just like feels like that was like a cool way that I've seen the quote and hourly combination done.
That's really smart.
That is really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's also a matter of, you're the expert, right? So like I'm positioned to tell them what I think it's going to cost based on my experience. Well, my experience, it varies, like, and it's not so for example, I hear a lot about the wedding industry because I live with somebody who's a wedding photographer, and wedding photography is so cookie cutter. It's this package. If you want this, and even wedding planners, from an event side, you kind of know in general what an wedding might look like, right? And so it doesn't stray that far. Versus what I'm doing, I need to make sure that I am justifying all the steps along the way. And a lot of people so I'll bid out like even the cost of a table, or like the wine glasses and everything. You kind of have to picture the whole deal, but that also depends on the client. Like some clients don't necessarily want that, they might have that stuff already or whatnot. They just want to know my cost. And so I just note that, in a contract is, okay, this is what my value is to you. And if you want me to, give you a budget estimate, I have peers who actually charge for that stuff. So for a bid, they charge for it. Maybe eventually I can do that. Right now, or like 2 months ago, I was too busy to think about doing that sort of thing, but it just depends. I think some people structure it differently in that way. I would love to be able, I'm afraid of scaring people off still right now, so I don't quite do that, but some people do.
We can definitely relate to that.
Yeah, I think in the beginning it was like so much of, giving deals and also like working with friends a lot for us, and just kind of doing things for like half off. And then suddenly strangers started paying full price, and we were like, oh, cool, it's happening now.
But even determining what full price should be, I think, is a tricky thing to navigate. I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Totally. And
Brittany and Evan, is your pricing pretty strict, or is it kind of like Megan's where it's like, hey, these people want to come, just do one winery and this amount of climbing, so it's really like it varies a ton? Is that something you deal with, or?
Well, so initially what we wanted to do, because I did wildlife tours here for 4 years, and we had like the day trips, but then we also had these multi-day tours where we would kind of like include everything: meals, lodging, transportation, all that kind of stuff. And that was kind of the initial vision that I had, was like, create these custom trips for people. And pretty quickly realized that wasn't nearly as marketable as just a cookie cutter, like, here's the price, here's what you get, either you want it or you don't. So we kind of initially, well, especially since I was building the website, it was difficult. I was just doing it in WordPress, and it was difficult to like find a booking app that would do a pricing structure that was like a kind of like variable instead of just set. And so that was kind of one of the first things that made me think, well, maybe this would be easier if it was just like, here's the price per person. And so that eventually became what made a lot more sense. And also we realized it was just a lot less work for us to not be worrying about lodging for people and meals and that kind of thing. We just pick them up from their hotel, take them on a tour, and then drop them back off. So yeah, we kind of like started out with a bigger vision, and very quickly realized that it needed to be kind of like shrunk down and packaged and put into something that was a little easier for a consumer to consider.
do you think it's important in your industry to have pricing on your website, so when people come to you, they know immediately?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think pretty much every client that we've had, or guest that we've had so far, has booked before ever even talking to us, on the phone or via email or anything like that. So yeah, I think that they see it, they know what they're getting and what they're paying for it, and then they make that decision on their own. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do this. And then, they hear from us, and we get information about like shoe size, that kind of stuff. But yeah, it starts out with them definitely like seeing the price, knowing what they're getting, and then making that decision on their own.
I'm curious I feel like it's totally different, like client base that we would be going for versus what you're doing. It's such a customized, specific, like you're providing, I mean, we're a service, but it's just totally different.
Yeah. Well, and that's a service to businesses for the most part.
Yeah. And it's so variable, it seems like, on your end. Whereas in the beginning, we wanted it to be variable, but we learned that like our client base kind of needed to be told what they were going to do and how much it was going to cost.
It's foreign. They've never.
Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of people have never climbed, and they're signing up for it, and they don't really know what they're getting, so they don't want to have to make any decisions.
Right.
They just want to know, I'm taking you rock climbing, and I'm going to teach you how to do it, and I've got all the equipment, and this is what it costs.
Right. And this is the experience I'm going to provide to you.
Yeah.
Megan, I'm assuming that as you do this for longer, you'll start seeing patterns potentially of like the sizes and the hours, and like I wonder if someday you'll be able to have like levels, like a gold level or a silver level, or like with experience when you like see where the parallels start to be, you might be able to like streamline your like pricing packages.
And that would definitely be a lot less work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love that. And that's the concept I was starting to think about with the marketing person, because that's a roadblock I've run into with clients, is I am obligated. So you're throwing an event for someone. How do you make an event good? Well, marketing. Like they have on their end, they have to be putting out content for social assets, like, bit.ly links for like different media. Like there's a million different things that go into it. And so maybe that's a step up or a tier that I start offering is, hey, like, let's have a conversation about your marketing. What do you feel like you have the capacity to do right now? I offer this as an add-on where you have, like your marketing person who
you hire that one guy you worked with.
Miles. Yeah. You basically hire somebody who is on my team who who can do all of that for them. That just also made me think of the structure that I like to have is I call people partners, even though, you know, they're just like, I'll white label for another event company, you know, or they'll white label for me. And so I'll pitch to clients, hey, I have a team of 5. Like, God knows who those 5 people might be when I say that. You know, but I have an idea of who it would probably be. Like, I've talked to all these people. They all are cool with me saying that. Sometimes I'll use like his name or, you know, different people's names where that's my team. Like that's my business. And I think that's a business model that I've seen PR firms, you know, starting to do, and, you know, even event companies do, where it adds value, where you're saying like, you don't have anyone on your payroll, but hey, if I have a client who comes to me and they need like a huge film festival or like, you know, some kind of summer gala or whatnot, I have the capacity and people bandwidth to be able to do that. So, yeah. And so pricing that out, pricing is definitely the biggest, that's the hardest thing.
I mean, hearing Franny mention the tiered idea, is that something that would be, trying to think of the word, acceptable to have like one system where, okay, a company like the North Face comes to you, right? Hey, we're doing a launch party, that you know, like the kind of the caliber company they are. And so that you can offer them that tiered system. And then Giver comes to you, bunch of guys in a garage.
Yeah.
You can say, hey, this is my system for you guys. So it's like almost a double system, or you can even have like 3 or 4 of those parallel concepts, but then you just gauge it based off of, okay, Squaw comes to you and wants to do a panel, that they have the ability to look at it and say, oh, a tiered system of 25, 50, 75, or 100 people, cool, we fall within that. Or that, like, I say, hey, Megan, I'm doing a full table. I really want to up the ante and make it even more intense. That knowing it's casual with friends like this, that you able to say, oh, okay, you fall within this system.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be like one or the other necessarily.
Yeah, totally. I think I have that in my head mentally anyway. It's just a matter of getting it to paper and seeing what that looks like. Something that I always do when I put proposals together is option 1, 2, and 3. So then they always have the ability, and 3 is like a reach, right? But maybe not. Yeah. Depends on what they're thinking. It gives me room to be able to, you know, win or lose a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, and with that being said, do you feel like the more that you are putting on these events and the more clients that you have, I'm sure you'll start to be able to see commonalities between certain quote unquote tiers to make the pricing more accessible. I'm just curious with, like, since all of us have started a business, how pricing, I mean, it needs to ebb and flow. Like even just the studio that I help manage, seeing their pricing over the past 10 years, it's continuously evolving and changing with what other people are doing, what the needs of the studio are, this like how much rent you're paying on the building. Like, I just for myself have realized that with pricing, I just think it's an evolution, especially starting a business. You can say, okay, this is my base. This is like, these are the pricings. Yeah. And then very soon that may change. And I don't know, I feel like, Megan, you're probably seeing that already with the events that you've been putting on, the events that you've been planning. Yeah.
That's exactly.
I think it's an evolution.
Totally. Yeah. And like the line is like, how do you not put yourself out too far to be able to come back from it, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm willing to do this for you. And I think that comes in making sure they are aware that they're getting a deal without belittling yourself as a startup. Because I'm just starting my business. I mean, sure, I'm 24. I'm not 50 with a million years of experience. but still, like I you know, have done this since I was literally, like, my senior project in high school was Tom 3 without shoes. We threw an event at senior year of high school. So there's things that I've learned to I've learned to be like, okay, no, just because you think anyone knows that, that's not true. Like, you know, I take stuff for granted. Easily I'll be like, oh, everybody knows that. Like, but no, that's
Yeah.
not true. You know, like
I wonder if you could frame it, instead of it being like, hey, I'm hooking you up with a discount, or like, I know you guys really well, that like the idea of, hey, this is your first event with me. Therefore, first time events get 50% off. That's like a given, no matter how big the event is. And then you have like something set in where it's oh, you are a long-term partner, so you've done 3+ events with me, and therefore over time you get greater discounts, the more events you put on with me. That way it's something where it's like, they know there's discounts worked in, they're incentivized to do the first one with you. Oh, we know it's 50% off.
Right.
And they're also incentivized to keep working with you, because then, hey, if we get to 3 events with her, the first one was awesome, we'll start at 95% or whatever, not 95% off, but you know.
That's really cool. I like that a lot. Instead of like devaluing yourself potentially by just saying this is a
Exactly. I mean, with MJ and I, we do engagements and wedding photography ourselves, and like a challenge for us. Yeah, we've been doing it for about a year, pretty casually, mainly just friends.
Pretty similar with Brittany and Evan. We technically started it 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I remember it was around the same time.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, we're like, oh, we have this idea.
And so, but with us, we've just been pretty much giving friends and family free shoots, right? And with the idea that it's building a portfolio, wonderful. But yeah, we haven't established that vernacular of your first time shooting with us is this amount, because it doesn't really make sense for us. Oh, your first wedding, you get 50% off, right? Whereas with you, it seems that there's a continued,
totally,
hopefully like a relationship you're building, right?
Yes, yeah. As much as you take the shot and you're done, I mean, you're planning the next one hopefully together too. Yeah, totally. I really like that, and making sure they know right off the bat that, like, first time customers, I'm happy to like work with you on a plan and figure out how we can bring this down so you trust me, and then as this goes along, I'll bring you into my more normal pricing structure and see how that looks down the line.
Yeah, and another thing we've done, which we get good feedback on, we've never had to actually implement it, but is we say to people, hey, if we do an engagement shoot with you and the first night you're like, dang, that's kind of a bummer, I look bad in that dress, the lighting was bad, whatever, that like, we're flexible, we'll go out with you the next night. And like, that's, for your world, that's a much bigger commitment. But something along those lines where if you're not completely satisfied with the event, I'll do the next one for 75% off. I don't know, something like that, where it's setting them up to be like, oh, okay, she cares, she is incentivized to work hard for us. And they kind of like, that fear base goes away a little bit.
I'm also curious though, Megan, because for Will and I, we both have full-time salary jobs. So for us, like, being able to do shoots is just super fun, and like there's no pressure for us to need to make a certain amount of money because we're already covered on that basis. Are you doing Made Rowdy full-time currently?
Yeah.
Cool. So then there's also that tier for you of needing to be like, well, also with the time I have, need to make this amount just to be able to survive.
Yeah, and that's something I need to spend time on, and have spent a good amount of time just like literally dollar slicing and working it backwards. I listen to this awesome podcast. She's a bit basic, but I kind of like her. Jenna Kutcher, and she has like a million different tips for marketing stuff, and she actually says you should never do anything for free. Or no, she says, how does she say it? Okay, she does family and friends, or just family, I think, for free when she started. Otherwise it's full price. And so you don't do any in between, in her mind. And she was a wedding photographer. This was based on wedding photography. And I think that's interesting. Like, it just depends. It really just depends. She's established enough where she can say that. For me, I'm a little bit more like, okay, I'm I was comfortable going out on my own based on my connections. I feel good about the people I know and where I can bring this together to be. But that doesn't necessarily mean I'm established. So,
Yeah.
But no one else knows how many events you have or haven't done. And I almost feel like sometimes you can lose customers by underpricing yourself because they will think, well, she doesn't know what she's doing. She's not going to do a good job. She's not valuing herself. And also, if you price higher, people will work harder to meet you where you need to be met, as a partner within the work structure, because they're incentivized to make this the best event ever because they're really putting their money down, versus if you're on the lower end, they can kind of write you off as your clients a little bit and be like, oh, whatever, I'm not gonna give you my time of day or brainstorm with you, or I think with it's tricky. I think more the idea that resonates with me, what Will said, is if they do 3 or 4 events with you, then they'll start getting a discount because then you'll know them really well. You'll know their style. You're going to spend way less hours on the actual work.
Right.
But I think if you give discounts and then that makes you not value yourself and see your own self-worth, that's going to show through and they're not going to value you. So you just have to be bad bitch mode the whole way. Own it, I think.
So then just charge what you charge. And then what about Will's point of going back to I don't know, first time working together deal? What do you think?
I would say an intro, a free consultation is great.
I was actually about to totally echo what Franny was saying, because I feel like we initially, when we were setting up our pricing, we kind of worked backwards from what we thought it was going to cost and decided oh, well, we can actually lowball this other similar company and, make more business because we're pricing lower kind of thing. But I think you kind of have to also recognize what the other businesses are offering and what you're offering, what your value is, and don't undervalue yourself, because the right clients are gonna come to you and meet you, like she said, at that price and recognize the value that you're bringing to the table.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously starting out, you gotta go low and try to get some feedback. But once you kind of break that barrier, then definitely don't be afraid to recognize, value of what you're doing.
Question for you, Megan. I've never been to Truckee. In relation to so Jackson, for example, super hard. Sorry, I'm chewing. Super hard. I have felt in starting a business in Jackson, in the sense that Jackson has tiers of clients, like us, who we know what we could pay for a service, and that's one tier. Or there's people who have multi-million-dollar homes that you can really up your price because they can easily meet that. Is Truckee the same, or is it different? Do you have levels of clients, and has that kind of moved how you're pricing your events?
Totally. So Truckee's between Reno and San Francisco. So San Francisco brings up the money here, which is a big reason why I liked the thought of moving here 2 years ago. It's compared to living in Durango when I was down there, you're secluded. You have what you have, versus here, for better or for worse, in times like right now where all the Bay Area people are coming to their second homes up here, it's a bit hard for our community. But in times when the money is flowing, it's a huge positive for me, because you have this small town feel and mountain town feel with a lot of money backing it, kind of like Jackson. So you lose in certain ways, but I think my clients, I'm aiming for the ones who can pay the higher structure anyway, and I'm not necessarily going to take the lower ones. I did take a client, my first client, at a very low price, and I regret it, because I don't regret it because it's given me so many opportunities. But from a pay standpoint, I could hear myself in my head going, you know, Megan, like, they're only paying you this much. This is just, you know, and I never want to work like that. Like, I want to work and provide them with the best, and I should always, no matter what. I decided that that price was okay for me, you know? So, but knowing that now, I would rather say no thank you and find another one, you know, and do it that way. And there's definitely enough out here, like my client North Star is one of my better clients, and they're a large resort. They're backed by Vail Resort, so they have the money, and plenty of people here.
Nice.
What?
I didn't realize you meant that North Star. That's cool.
Oh yeah, the North Star up. It's like right there. Yeah, but they're in a world of hurt right now. My goodness, like they've furloughed all their any hourly employees. They've furloughed, like even most of their salary employees until probably the fall. Like, yeah, I don't think events over 50 will happen until December. That's my theory.
Do you ever talk with a client and offer or kind of have the conversation about like a full year's worth of events, or is it just one?
Mm-hmm. So I often, I'll pitch for a whole year of different events, for example. So like, you know, like a traveling van, a Truckee Thursday, a launch of these 3 products. So I give them the full scope if they ask for it, so they can see what a year might look like. So like the biggest benefit of my business is, in my opinion, is that people, you know, we were in a really good economy. People didn't necessarily want to hire a full-time events person, but they have 25 to 100 grand set aside to poke at different holes, at least in the outdoor industry. The other thing, MJ, is that you probably know this, the outdoor industry just is a joke of money, you know, like it's the worst industry to be in if you want to try to make it big.
It's saturated too.
Yes, totally. And I'm hoping, and events are totally saturated, but I'm hoping that like this niche in the outdoor industry, there's only like 3 or 4 companies, and more are trying to do it right now. Like events are growing really quick, and I saw that and jumped on it. Maybe like at the moment it was happening, not before or anything, but where I feel like people are like, we want experiences. Like retail is kind of dying. You know, how do we bring people into our retail store, for example? Like let's say I have a client who's a retailer. Well, how do we, you know, retail is more than just the clothes on the hanger now. It's this community of people in their town who think of them when it comes to cool shit, you know, like, or even like a brewery, you know, like there's a brewery called Alibi here in Truckee that does tons of different things, from like comedy shows to clothing swaps to whatever. And I think you have to start thinking outside of the box right now, or else your retail store is going to go completely under. And we're shifting to an online world, and even more so now, like to figuring out like, how do you continue? People still and will always want experiences and people person to person contact. Like as much as, and maybe right now this will bring that to light a little bit, where people are like, okay, that was kind of cool that we all thought we could do this online, but like now let's actually get together and like talk, and like this, you know, that wheel that you're putting on, it's, you know, you're bringing people together to talk about things so that you can cultivate community. Like we crave community, we crave experiences. And my goal is to be able to go to these brands and say, how can I give you your best experience for your client or for your customer? And oftentimes like when it comes down to it, it's the ROI of an event that's difficult, because how do you necessarily measure the success in an event? You know, they're not buying, you know, a bunch of, you know, gloves at that moment, but they're probably going to later, a year from now, when they're like, oh, Giver, like they always throw these super fun parties, like, you know, or whatever. Like I love that brand, or the list goes on. But I think we need connection, and that's why I started this business. I don't think that'll go away.
Do you see that as something so like with where we're at with COVID right now, do you see a rebound and kind of like uptick? So as soon as we're like, hey, you don't need to be sheltered in place, you can go see your friends, you can travel now, all that kind of thing. Do you see a potential for you to have a ton of events really fast. This is something you can kind of start working towards, like, hey, I'll do this event for you as a like we're back kind of thing, and you pay for it over the course of a year.
Yeah, right.
You can
figure out payment plans. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, unfortunately, in my opinion, that's not going to happen. I think it's going to take a year and a half plus to get people to feel okay in that kind of environment, especially if you've been sheltering in place. Like many people aren't, right? And so then it's maybe a little more normal, or even an older, maybe like the 30 to 40 generation who doesn't necessarily feel the same way as a lot of millennials who are like ready to go right when this starts. Like I have a client who are planning these like intimate setting 50-person fundraising conversations over like a fire and having nice wine, and like that's fine, but the like 200-person events, I just don't see that happening for another year to feel like, even my own wedding, for God's, like I'm trying to figure out, I don't want to make people feel weird coming to my wedding. Like, that you can stay home. I don't want you there anyways, like.
I think there's a huge opportunity in that, though, that coming out of this, people, there's not going to be that much to talk about and like to small talk specifically about. So I feel like people are going to be more interested in like maybe like learning things and like interacting in a way where like they are led through the experience and the interaction. So like for us, like we do weddings and events, and something that we're looking at is like, how can we do like a lot of like cooking classes and like workshops and like 10-person events, or even just a family, or people that are like haven't seen each other through all of this and have also people have been saving money, you think people maybe and so how
not everyone's laid off, like there's plenty of
right. So how can you create like really like one of a kind, small, really like integrative, like you will learn things through this experience type of events? Like I think it's just going to shift a little, but I think there will be just as much, if not more, business.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm not worried about that in a sense of will I get business or not. It's a matter of like, can you plan these larger events and will they be the same? And you have to be careful. Like you can't just host an event like it was before. You're going to have to figure out how to reintegrate yourself into this event, or depending on the customer or the audience or what that company has been doing through all of this. Like maybe they're, they haven't had a message about it or like a PR word to say, and then all of a sudden they're saying we're back. Like you kind of have to, it depends on the client, but that's a really good point. I like that. That's encouraging to hear you say that too. I think
even like company bonding experiences, I think would be something that like I would think to pitch, where it's like employees haven't been working together and have went through this like probably like somewhat traumatic experience. Like how can you facilitate like just company-wide events that are like, hey, like we're back together, let's like go through this experience and then start working again. That could be a niche.
That's really cool.
And targeting the clients who haven't been set back. My experience right now is that the next, the last month and the next 4, everyone's question marking, right? And so they don't have money to spend, and they've cut all spending. Like, from a sales side, the job that I continue to do, you can't pitch sales for, you have to pitch, hey, how can we help? How can we, and they've stopped all spending. Like in the ski industry specifically, there's no spending happening if they don't have to. So I guess maybe when there's like clarity on how this will affect the economy, and everyone has their opinion on how long this will be, but let's say it's 6 months, let's say it's 3 years, like it'll just depend. We're still in this like, we'll see.
I'm curious, with all of that being said, with all of you, twofold, how you're viewing the business now. If things continue to be more, we're in shelter, it's digital. How do you see your own businesses evolving digitally? And then when people can start to gather again, kind of, Franny, you already touched on that second part. But like you were saying, Megan, since there is so many questions. Yeah, and like the in-shelter ordinance, I just can't imagine on April 30th, on May 1st, people like getting out there and doing the things that used to be. I mean, two different types of people. Some people will absolutely do that. Others will be very wary. So how do you cater almost to both populations within your business? This has been something we've been talking about at the studio because we've switched to only digital classes right now, and that's great. But we just are moving into a new location, so we want to do classes when we're able to at the new location, but it's like how many people can come into that new location. And we're operating from that we're still going to have a digital platform so that both teachers and students alike can choose.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Megan, I have this is a wild thought based on MJ's questions, and it could be really ridiculous, so bear with me here. But my buddy Gunner, you know Gunner, he sent me a video of Angel Collinson, the pro skier, wearing a Giver shirt, and she's like making dinner or something. She's like, yo, Giver. She's actually dating one of our buddies. Yeah.
Oh.
So we kind of know.
Your buddy.
Yeah, he's a cool guy. But anyways, so what I'm thinking here is that there are all these pro athletes out there who are training, but they're not competing. They probably are like Jimmy Chin, where he's like, "Hey, stay home," right? Like they're really pushing for that stuff.
Yeah.
And with the virtual world, people are increasingly doing these like Huckberry. Huckberry did Jamestown Revival. They came on and played some jams on Instagram Live, right? Yeah. And oh, hey, tune into One World, and Chris Martin's going to be singing. Great. That I wonder if you had the ability to it'd be a small side project of sorts, but it would get your name going out there of reaching out to those professional athletes and saying, hey, I run an event business. I'm working on, I don't know how you phrase it, but basically would love to sit down with you and interview you on Zoom for half an hour, and almost host live events where you're just talking with professional athletes. What's your upbringing like? What's your training like? Oh, you're living in Jackson. How do you feel about that? That it's like MJ's saying, it's like a small virtual event, but then once you come out of this, people are like, oh, Made Rowdy, you did that little series with Angel Collinson, Johnny Collinson,
which then technically you've worked for them. So those are our clients.
And it's pretty easy. That's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, right? The execution, the best part, of course, is getting through to them. But once you do that,
or you start with the connections that I already have with those sort of people, which would be simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I'm trying to think about how you can make it into more.
Why would they want to do it though? You know, what's?
I would pitch it to a company rather than doing it through your own platform. I would maybe write out the concept and then
Oh yeah, totally.
What brand would buy that live event, and then you could pay that too.
I mean, you could almost even have just call it a sponsor. Hey, Coalition Snow, you started off with this meeting with Tim Dershey is brought to you by Coalition Snow. Check them out. They make rad skis. Boom. They throw $100 in. I don't know how that, again, the payment works, but they are incentivized to post it themselves and share it to a larger audience. It seems to me that those kind of events are really blowing up. I watched the Dave Matthews live little thing. There he was jamming out super high, and he's having a good time. Millions of people watching him do this, right?
But I have a question. At what point does that get old?
I know.
Well, so to me, I think if you have a unique person each time, right? So the full table model, we do in the past, I've liked to have the context of, or the structure of every other week so that the dinners don't get old. You have new faces coming through. But that I think if you have new people sharing, and you could even say, hey, again, Angel Collinson as an example, tell us about a passion outside of skiing. We'd love to hear about it, because like next weekend, I'm actually having Franny and Blaine share about in season, and I'm like bringing my chef buddies together, right? And so it's gonna be like a whole food-based one. And then I have Evan and Brittany do one on climbing, and Craig Devine. And so like it kind of just morphs and can grow. But by presenting it to them in a way that's less of a, hey, tell me all about your ski career, they're like, I'm kind of burnt out on that. I don't really want to share that. Like Angel Collinson, for example, I know she's with our buddy Pete. They're buying a sailboat to sail around the world.
Shut
But
up.
hear about that. Like,
Can I just be Pete?
experience like, right?
So you can, but also with that is like you can go in that direction, or like you're based out of Truckee. Why don't you do some Truckee athletes, like, and have it be, keep it more local? Because I feel like what you were saying, when does that get old? It's like, yeah, you could scroll through podcasts and YouTubes and you can see the best of the best doing all of these things. But what I've seen, at least working more locally with a yoga studio, there's that option to have a lot of people come in and like take that class, but the people who are taking those classes could be taking a free class on a different platform, but they're choosing to pay to teach a class with an instructor that they know, to see all these other people that they'd always been practicing with. So I think the value of a local community right now, people, is huge.
I love that. So much of that is just the content being quality, right? Like Brittany and Evan could take the same people on the same trip every single week, because as long as they're doing fun climbs, having good wine, like hell yeah, if I could do that every weekend, I would. That sounds great. So like there's, as long as that content is quality and these athletes like are chill and they're having fun, exploring the thoughts with you. I mean, that was an idea.
I think too, like a concept I've been trying to play with is how can I support other businesses too? So I have like a crew of like 5 to 10 girlfriends who like within the last year started their own business. And how can we do like a bit of a like round robin almost, like bring you guys in and do this like shout out scenario that maybe is a little more than just social media. That's, you know, like maybe you share their logo and their website on your Instagram or whatnot, but how can you make it a little more intriguing? And so maybe it's like, you know, I don't know, your company with one of your favorite athletes that you work with, or one of your most inspirational people, and then you bring them in. So you're bringing your value in too. I really like that idea, and maybe like, and doing it like now, because like this will be done soonish, and we'll kind of be like wary of the concept, but like piping in now, I think that's really awesome. And so
I love your idea of pairing them. I mean, you could have Craig Devine come and like, here's this entity of a brand or in season sitting there, and they almost supply the athlete. Like Craig Devine brings Alex Honnold. Wow, congrats you guys. And Franny and Blaine show up, and wait a minute, Blaine's already a pro athlete. Great. I think that combo is kind of a fun way to think about it.
Going back to your mission of connecting customers like with clients, I wonder if there's like, if the North Face, or what are some brands that you work with?
I work with Coalition Snow, North Star, Ski Racing, nonprofit.
So like if Coalition Snow would send out like a newsletter and email to all of their clients that had like 5 free like Zoom events or live events, and like one was like a yoga class, one was a learn how to like tune your skis class, one was a speaker series, like kind of like what, because that's like really the goal, right? Is like connecting your clients with their customers. So how can these brands stay relevant and like offer to their client communities?
Coalition Snow's they're pretty savvy. They've done a good job pretty quick of putting together like happy hours, and they do a small business support group every Wednesday at 3.
That's
But
awesome.
I think you just even saying that is a good reminder to be like, okay, pitch yourself as one of those people who they could be interviewing, like for real, and like in making sure that you're staying relevant and important in a time when people could easily just like forget. Yeah.
I also think that there's like an overload of like people putting themselves out there, and I think it's great. And I think there's also something being said about like sitting back and like taking care of yourself and taking care of your needs and like patiently building during this time too. Like I don't know if just like output is like necessarily the only way either. Like don't let that stress you out. Like if you don't feel like you're like putting enough out.
Yeah. I think I've gone through that exact thought process in the last couple weeks. I'm like, is this even my style to do that? Not really, but like I like the idea, but like maybe there's a way, going back and forth. Like I wanted, and I don't really want to do it anymore. I decided against it. I was like, I'm gonna have all my partners do like the little like written thing on a notepad. It says like the thing that I am most looking forward to when the quarantine is over. And hopefully it's some kind of event or like a date night with your fiance or whatever, like, and then I started to, I was like, why am I doing this? Like, what's the point? Okay. I just like the idea for a second.
Is the wedding world, so like you said that you're mainly doing outdoor industry events currently. Are there other industries that you're curious about exploring? Like, I want to do more food-based projects, or weddings interest me. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, weddings do interest me just because that's the world I've been in recently. But I think that takes a special person, and that's probably not me. But no, I don't know, not specifically. I really do like the outdoor industry. I think if you could move into like the beer world a little bit, I think there's a little more money in that. Working with breweries who base their business around events. I'd like to focus a little more on that. But really, I think my connections are in the outdoor industry. I have partners who have clients with like banks and things like that who have a good amount of money to do corporate events. And I think I would be interested in doing like 4 corporate events a year, if I can find the right partner on that. And depending on what they want, and maybe I'm positioned in a different, I'm in Truckee. So how do you, I don't know, not sure, but yeah, maybe corporate and beer.
Yeah.
Those go well together, right?
Is there, I'm bombarding you with questions, but is there a specific skill of yours that you could potentially work towards as being like your sole offering? So for example, one of my buddies from Oregon, my design program, he works for a company now that just does like the wall installation at events. So Nike will say to them, hey, this is our idea. We want this wall to be just shoes. They need to be glowing. They need to be flashing, and they need to slowly rotate, right? Like they have this really specific thing, and they just build these crazy interactive walls. Is that something that like event people do, where you could say to them like, hey, I'm really good at blank? Or is it kind of you want to have that full experience for yourself?
I think I'm really good at logistics and connections, and they don't necessarily have the connection to that vendor who does the wall art, things like that. Like when I hear you say that, like I'd love to follow up with you about that and talk to you about that person. That's super cool, because I bet one of my clients would love that. So I think it's knowing someone who knows someone, and that's always been my skill, is to connect people and just kind of be able to bring people together. Yeah, it's not specific. It's logistics and connections, I think, if I had to pin it down. Yeah. In your world, what would that be in terms of marketing and design?
For my skills, you're asking?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm trained as a designer from school. With Giver, our structure is a little bit more focused on like slow growth, launching a single hero product every year, every 2 years roughly. We're very focused on crowdfunding, right? So we launched it on Kickstarter or Indiegogo and let it go from there. But I've kind of stepped into this marketing role, which is pretty cool. And since I am leading our design in some ways and leading the marketing in some ways, my skill is kind of being able to like make sure that those are really closely interconnected. And it's like a space that I've kind of recently noticed and kind of, oh, okay, I'm actually doing this. So I'm trying to become more intentional about it and work with our team to make that, more intentional. But I guess that's what I would say within that world. Honestly, Full Table is my main passion. Like, I love hearing about people's passions and playing through ideas because like we've been talking for an hour roughly-ish, that like your ideas, you get to like really work through them and people who care, right? And like Brittany and Evan have their point of view, Franny has her point of view, we have ours. And to like get that insight, I just think that so many people lack that and are in this space all the time of like, man, like I'm running a bread business. What the heck do I do now? And like, hey, Franny, think about this. Or you're crushing it with the work, the little videos, like keep doing that. And just to give that support and that purpose, that's, I think, where I'm headed more so. But
you're really good at asking questions, Will.
You are. I've noticed that.
It's funny actually, Megan, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. So the idea of what validates you to be an expert, right? Like, hey, how can you go to a company and say, I'm phenomenal at events, or like, I'm the person you should be working with. I've been working on this side project that's kind of like an offshoot of Full Table that I call direction development. And basically it's saying, hey, people between 20 and 30 that they come out of college, they're fired up, they've got passions, they just learned a ton, they're stoked on life, but they're like, how do I have this land somewhere? How do I take my energy and focus it? Like, I love skiing, snowboarding, and surfing. How can I do all three of those, right? And so direction development, how I view it, which I've gotten some snarky remarks about, like, that's life coaching. You're 25 years old. You can't life coach. But the idea of direction development being like all about accountability. Like, I sit down with you, Megan, and once a week we like talk through different things. Hey, how's your relationship going? How is Made Rowdy going, like working right now? By next week, your lingering goal is this, your habitual, whatever, right? Having accountability. I think that's something people our age really struggle with. That like right now I'm on week 2 of waking up at 6 a.m. and running every morning with my buddy right there. Because one of his outcomes he wanted to really focus on was my morning routine. I want to get it dialed, but I haven't been able to. I said, screw it. We'll get up at 6 a.m. together. We'll run. And like, then you'll be up and you'll be moving and you'll be good, right? So 2 weeks in, we have 8 weeks to go. But yeah, so this direction development offshoot is like a very specific realm I'm diving into, where I've been really hesitant because it's like, I'm 25 years old. What gives me any reason for people to listen and think, oh yeah, Will's thoughts matter at all, right?
But it depends on your audience, though. I
Agreed.
have to before I forget, because like I think like I would not mind having a 25-year-old coaching me. If your skill is to hold me accountable and I don't have that skill, I'd rather you than a 55-year-old man. So
yeah, and that's been my thought.
Yeah, so you just have to think about who your audience is. Maybe your audience isn't the 6-year-old woman, or something like that. Your audience.
It's also, I feel like people think of life coaching as people giving advice.
Right.
I mean, that's not what it is.
Yeah.
It's almost like a type of therapy in a sense. This is what I'm hearing you say. This is what you're doing. How do we make those match up? So it's more of like, Franny was saying, you're good at asking questions. I mean, with me as well, I say things all the time and you're like, but you're not doing that. And you need someone there to hold you accountable and to make you recognize where you're falling short.
We are happily engaged, by the way. Yeah, I try to pitch it as a like a professional best friend that like
Awesome.
right that like you go to your best friend and you're like, hey man, you're vulnerable with them, you're open, and like you want honest feedback. And so that like oftentimes I'll go to MJ and say, MJ, my neck has been really killing me, and she'll say, you've got to do yoga. But because for some reason we ignore the people we love the most, I'm like, yeah, I'll do yoga next year, right? Like for some reason I don't prioritize it, which is ridiculous. Like if I go to Evan and Evan's like, oh man, dude, you've really got to start doing yoga, I start tomorrow. But it's like, yeah, I mean, it's funny how that works, right? I mean, it's purely based on our relationships, our perspectives we're getting. And so, yeah, the direction development realm is funny because it's like I'm validating myself as saying, I have a perspective. I'll give you the honest truth. I'm going to hold you accountable. And like, I can't start a business for you, but I can at least help you work towards that. Yeah, it's a fun challenge.
Yeah.
I have a business coach that's my age.
Do you?
Nice. There you go.
And it's
like your sister or something.
no. And I like legit, and maybe a little bit older, but I think like what I would celebrate about her is like, she like shares what works for her, but is like very open with like, that's not the way for everyone. That's just like one option. And it's more about like helping, prompting you to say the things that you need to say. It's not even as much like saying it for them, but it's like just, we all know so much more than we give ourselves credit for. And sometimes it's just like the right structure to like let it out. And then you're like, whoa, like I believe that about myself, like either in a positive or a negative. Like that's not a very serving belief. Or like, wow, like I should like act to that version of myself in a higher version, you know? So I find it extremely useful. And I think that it's actually inspiring to work with people like in your age group because it's more relatable and the lifestyle is similar. And I really like that aspect of being of similar age. So I just am saying that as like a huge encouragement.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, Megan, with your events, is that something, do you ever go and pitch ideas out of the blue? Like Coach and Snow, I've been watching you guys for the past year. I think it would be super rad if you did this, or to make the reach out.
Yeah, my comfort zone is for them to reach out, but because that's not me as much. It's funny, I'm logistics based. I'm good at ideas once they're spawned. My strength is not necessarily the initial idea. I get it from inspiration and whatnot. And so it often takes their idea for me to encourage them. And then I know a million others. So yes, of course I do pitch to other people, to brands, and have been, especially ones that I know and have followed. Like I probably sent out, I don't know, a handful of proposals in the last few months, just like, hey, like let's sit over coffee first and let's talk. And if you think this is a good idea, and everyone really did, you know, they're like, events, we've been thinking about it for years, you know, like we see our partners, our whatever you call it, people who are like them but not them. What is that word? What?
Competitors?
We see our competitors. I need more glasses of wine, I think. They see our competitors. So then they're like, oh, we've been wanting to do that for so long, but we just haven't had the chance to, or we don't know the right person, or, you know, our in-house person is just marketing. And so they don't have the time. My family is making this Lebanese food that
Oh,
they're
cool.
Perfect. Well, in that case, we can say good night, and everybody, thank you for joining. And yeah, well, I'll keep you in the loop with future full tables, whatever they're about. Who knows? But yeah, it's awesome having you guys. Megan, Made Rowdy, we're behind you.
Thanks for listening to me ramble. This is really cool. I was just telling Will how special it is to get invited and get to chat and see all of these projects come to fruition. I think it's such a time in life where we're all just like doing it, you know?
Yeah,